Howdy and welcome to our discussion of writing hypotheses. As you can see, a hypothesis is your prediction or your hunch as to the relationship between two variables. When we talk about writing hypotheses, there's two broad types. The first is the null hypothesis. There's only one of those. And then the second is a research hypothesis, and there are two types of those, a directional and a non-directional research hypothesis. In terms of the null hypothesis, it is a statement of equality between the variables that you're studying. So you assume them to be equal and write that they are. Our null hypotheses will always start with the first 5 words being the same. There is no difference between. And so if you think about the first bullet there, statement of equality, a statement of equality is that there is no difference between your variables. After that, you'll fill in the blank with what is your dependent variable, followed by what are the levels of your independent variable. So the dependent variable is what you're measuring, so that's going to be things like attitude, motivation, knowledge. Pretty simple typically to pick out. And then your independent variable is whatever the researcher either categorizes individuals on or manipulates. So let's talk about the manipulation first. The example that we'll see in a few minutes, we're looking at the differences in knowledge between two types of training, method A and method B. Well, method A and method B are what I, as the researcher, manipulate. So method A may be a face-to-face type of training, and method B may be online training. And again, it's considered to be manipulated because I, as the researcher, get to choose what those levels are or what the training is. The other type of independent variable can be based on categories. So a good example of that would be looking at differences in attitude based on gender. Their gender is our independent variable because that's not something that I as the researcher can manipulate. If you're a male, you're in the male group. If you're a female, you're in the female group. So the general form of our null hypothesis will be there is no difference between, and again you fill in the blank with what you're measuring, followed by an indication of what are the levels of your independent variable. For our purposes, it's considered to be the starting point. It's what we accept to be true unless we have other information. And it's also the benchmark, which simply means it is what is tested by the data. So in the example I just gave you, the null hypothesis would be there is no difference in knowledge when trained using method A versus method B. Notice that I did change one little word compared to the example. There is no difference in as opposed to there is no difference between, because it kind of didn't make sense to write it that way. So you can manipulate that 5th word if you want to. Technically you would be correct if you wrote there is no difference in knowledge based on training, but a more complete version of the null, and what I would expect you to write is what you see in front of you. I want you to give the reader some indication of what are the levels of your independent variable. In terms of research hypothesis, again, it is a statement between the variables where you, in fact, state that you believe there is a difference in the variables. And these are considered to be statements of inequality. And we'll look at that when we look at them individually. So let's look at a non-directional research hypothesis. Basically, a non-directional research hypothesis reflects that you believe there is a difference in the groups, but you don't say which direction the difference is. So if we look at an example here, there is a difference in knowledge when trained using method A versus method B. And so again, you can see I'm saying that there is a difference. I'm just not saying in which direction. I'm not saying method A is better than method B, and I'm not saying method B is better than method A. I'll just say that they are different. So if you take a moment, you can think probably very quickly, how do you change a null to a non-directional research hypothesis? The last type of hypothesis is a directional hypothesis. These are specific statements of directionality. So you as the researcher say, I believe one group is going to score better, do better, score higher. There's more of something or less of something. It doesn't have to be just more. So in this case, I might say method A will result in more knowledge than method B. So there, the definitive word again is more. So there's something in that statement that is results in it being the directionality, more of something, greater knowledge, more speed, better attitude, better retention rates.